Emily Johnson stirred a pot of rich, aromatic coffee in her cozy Manhattan kitchen, the sun filtering through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow on the small space. The scents of freshly baked croissants wafted from the oven, filling the air with a sense of comfort and anticipation. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time for Daniel to wake up. As she set the table for breakfast, her heart fluttered at the thought of the day ahead. Today was the day she would present her portfolio for the promotion to creative director. The weight of excitement mingled with a pinch of nervousness settled in her stomach. Just then, Daniel shuffled into the kitchen, his tousled hair and sleepy eyes bringing a smile to her face. "Morning, sleepyhead," Emily teased, pouring a steaming cup of coffee and handing it to him. "Morning," Daniel replied, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "What's cooking? It smells amazing." "Just some croissants and coffee to fuel us for the day," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I have my big presentation today." Daniel's face lit up, his tiredness momentarily forgotten. "That's right. I can't believe it's finally here. You're going to knock their socks off, Em." Emily felt her cheeks flush with warmth at his encouragement. "Thanks. I just hope I can convey my ideas clearly. This promotion means everything to me." They shared a comfortable silence, enjoying their breakfast, the sounds of the city awakening outside their window. The distant honking of horns and the chatter of pedestrians created a lively backdrop to their intimate moment. Later that morning, Emily met her best friend, Sarah Thompson, at a quaint cafe in Soho. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of clinking cups surrounded them as they settled into a cozy corner. "Okay, spill it. How are you feeling about the presentation?" Sarah asked, leaning forward with an eager smile. "I'm excited, but also nervous. What if they don't like my ideas?" Emily replied, her fingers nervously toying with her coffee cup. "Come on, Em. You're one of the most talented designers I know. They'd be crazy not to promote you," Sarah reassured her, waving her hands animatedly as if to emphasize her point. "Plus, you've put in so much hard work. You deserve this." Emily sighed, feeling the pressure of expectations. "I know, but sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be enough. And with Daniel's big case coming up, it feels like we're both on the brink of something monumental." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her expression shifting to one of curiosity. "Speaking of Daniel, how's he handling all the stress? I mean, he's been working crazy hours." Emily's lips pursed, her thoughts drifting to Daniel's late nights at the office. "He's been really focused. He's got this high-profile case, and it's pretty intense, but he's doing well. Just exhausted, I think." "Have you two had any time to celebrate together?" Sarah asked, her tone turning mischievous. "I mean, with both of you on the verge of such big changes, don't you think a little toast is in order?" Emily chuckled, shaking her head. "We've been so wrapped up in work. I hope we can find some time to celebrate soon. Maybe after my presentation if all goes well." "Or maybe he's planning a surprise proposal," Sarah said with a sly grin, her eyes glinting with playful excitement. Emily laughed, brushing the thought aside. "Oh, please, Sarah. We've talked about marriage, but I doubt he's planning anything like that right now. We're both too focused on our careers." As they sipped their coffees, Emily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe today would be the start of new beginnings for both her and Daniel. As the conversation flowed, Emily pushed aside the nagging feeling of doubt and embraced the warmth of friendship and the possibility of what lay ahead. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel sat in his sleek office, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He glanced at the clock, mentally preparing himself for the day's challenges. His boss approached, a confident smile on his face. "Good morning, Daniel. I just wanted to say how impressed I am with your work on the case. You're really making a name for yourself around here," he said, clapping a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot," Daniel replied, his heart swelling with pride. He leaned back in his chair, determination coursing through him. He was committed to making a difference, not just for himself, but for Emily too. As the day unfolded, both Emily and Daniel were unaware of the challenges that awaited them, their lives intricately woven together by love, ambition, and the vibrant pulse of Manhattan. Emily Johnson arrived home earlier than usual, the rhythmic clatter of her heels echoing in the hallway of their cozy Manhattan apartment. The comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but as she stepped through the door, an unsettling tension settled in her chest. She noticed Daniel's voice, deep and slightly strained, drifting from the living room. Curiosity piqued. She hesitated, her hand lingering on the doorframe as she leaned in to listen. "It's all set for tomorrow night," Daniel said, his tone low and urgent. "Make sure Alex knows we can't afford any slip-ups this time." Emily's stomach nodded. The name Alex hung in the air like a dark cloud, and a shiver ran down her spine. She strained to catch more of the conversation, but the words became muffled as her heart raced, pounding in her ears. Was Daniel planning a surprise for her? The thought flickered through her mind before the unease returned, drowning out any hopeful notions. This felt wrong. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and pushed the door open. The moment Daniel saw her, his expression shifted from focused to startled. The phone slipped from his hand onto the couch. "Hey, Em, you're home early," he said, attempting a casual smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, I heard you talking," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Who's Alex? Are you working on something I don't know about?" Daniel's demeanor changed, and the easy banter vanished. "It's nothing really, just a colleague from the firm," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "Nothing?" It sounded serious, Emily pressed, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to keep her composure. "You were talking about meetings and—" He cut her off, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. "Emily, I promise it's nothing for you to worry about. But I can't help but worry when I hear you sound so secretive." She shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "It feels like there's something you're hiding from me." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as a sign of his mounting stress. "You know how it is. Sometimes work gets complicated. I just don't want to drag you into it." Emily felt a mixture of hurt and confusion wash over her. "You're pushing me away, Daniel. I want to be there for you, but you need to let me in." "Letting you in doesn't mean I have to share every detail of my job," he replied defensively, stepping away from her, as if creating a distance she didn't want. The silence that followed was heavy, a chasm forming between them. Emily's heart sank as the conversation turned into an argument she never wanted. She could feel the walls of her trust begin to erode, the foundations of their relationship shaky beneath her feet. Later, she met her best friend Sarah at a small cafe in Soho, the familiar surroundings offering little comfort. As she stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, she recounted the troubling encounter. "Maybe he's planning a surprise for you," Sarah suggested, her brows furrowing in concern. "You know how men can be. Sometimes they just want to keep things under wraps for a while." Emily shook her head vehemently. "No, this doesn't feel like a surprise. It feels like something more sinister. I overheard him talking about meetings and—" "Emily, you're reading too much into this. If he's been working hard on a case, it could be any number of things," Sarah interjected, trying to soothe her friend's growing anxiety. "But what if it's not? What if he's mixed up in something dangerous?" Emily's voice trembled as the weight of her concerns pressed down on her. Sarah leaned in closer, her expression serious. "You need to trust him, Em. He loves you. If there's anything going on, he'll tell you when he's ready. But you can't jump to conclusions without facts." Emily sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. "I know, but I can't shake the feeling that something's off. I just wish he would open up to me." As they talked, Emily's heart raced with the nagging thought that her serene life was on the brink of unraveling. The sense of unease sat heavily in the pit of her stomach, and she couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay hidden behind the facade of their seemingly perfect life. The laughter and chatter of the cafe faded into the background as her mind spiraled into a whirlwind of worry, leaving her to grapple with the growing shadows of doubt in her heart. The rain fell steadily in Manhattan, the sound of droplets hitting the pavement blending with the distant roar of traffic. Emily Johnson stood behind a lamppost, her heart racing, as she watched Daniel Miller disappear into the shadows of a crumbling building in Queens. The city's vibrant energy felt miles away, replaced by a heavy sense of dread that hung in the air like the storm clouds above. "Come on, Emily. This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, gripping her umbrella tightly as she peered through the dim light. "You're being paranoid. He's probably just working late." But deep down, her instincts screamed otherwise. The fragments of the phone conversation she had overheard echoed in her mind, twisting her stomach into knots. "Meet Alex at the usual spot," he had said. What usual spot? Who was Alex? Thoughts raced through her mind, each more troubling than the last. As she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, a chilling gust of wind swept through the street, causing her to shiver involuntarily. She pulled her coat tighter around her, glancing around for any sign of movement. The building loomed ahead, its peeling paint and cracked windows telling stories of neglect and decay. Emily's pulse quickened as she spotted a few figures entering the building. People she didn't recognize, each one cloaked in the anonymity of the night. "Okay, just a little closer," she whispered, inching her way along the sidewalk. The rain poured down, soaking her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the entrance, where Daniel had vanished moments ago. She felt a mix of fear and determination surging through her veins. What was he doing here? What was going on? Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her back to reality. It was a text from Sarah. "Are you okay? You've been quiet. Everything good with Daniel?" Emily hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen, contemplating a response. How could she explain the unease that had settled over her? "I think I'm following him. Something's not right," she typed quickly, hitting send before she could second-guess herself. The response came almost instantly. "What? Why? Just talk to him." Emily felt a pang of guilt, knowing that Sarah was right. She should just confront Daniel, but the fear of what she might discover kept her rooted in place. She didn't want to believe that the man she loved could be hiding something so sinister. As she stood there, drenched and shivering, she spotted a shadow moving inside the building. Her heart raced as she leaned closer, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. From her vantage point, she could see Daniel's silhouette, illuminated briefly by a flickering overhead light. He was speaking to a group of people, his gestures animated, but their faces were obscured in the dim light. Emily strained to hear snippets of their conversation, but the rain drowned out most of the sound. All she caught was the name Alex again, and her stomach churned. "Why can't I hear what they're saying?" she whispered in frustration, her eyes darting around for any sign of help. She felt completely alone, a lone observer in a world she didn't belong to. Just then, her phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. "Emily, please, you know I worry about you. Talk to him." Emily sighed, the weight of her friend's words pressing down on her. She was about to respond when she noticed a figure break away from the group inside and head toward the door. Panic surged through her. What if this person saw her? She quickly ducked behind the lamppost, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure stepped outside, a man in a dark coat with a hood pulled up. Emily could see his face as he glanced around, his expression unreadable. She held her breath, hoping he wouldn't look her way. Luckily, he turned and walked past her, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. As she caught her breath, Emily's resolve hardened. She had to know what was happening. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "This ends tonight," she muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible above the rain. With a newfound determination, she stepped out from behind the lamppost, her heart racing as she approached the entrance. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, urging her forward. This was it. She would confront Daniel, uncover the truth, and put an end to the uncertainty that had plagued her for days. Emily stood in the dimly lit living room of their Manhattan apartment, her heart racing as she confronted Daniel. The air was thick with tension, and each second felt like an eternity. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, a physical manifestation of the whirlwind of emotion swirling within her. She had been wrestling with the fragments of the conversation she had overheard, and now she couldn't hold back any longer. "Daniel," she began, her voice shaky yet resolute. "I need to know what's going on. I heard you on the phone earlier, and it didn't sound like just work." Daniel paused, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. He had been caught off guard, his casual demeanor slipping away. "Emily, I can explain," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she recognized as a sign of his unease. "It's not what you think." "What do you mean it's not what I think?" she pressed, stepping closer. "You mentioned meetings and someone named Alex. It sounded serious, like you're involved in something dangerous. Daniel's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and irritation flickering across his face. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it. Handle what? Emily felt a surge of frustration. You can't just keep this from me. We're supposed to be partners, Daniel. Partners, he snapped, his voice rising. You think it's easy for me to walk into meetings with people who are involved in sensitive operations? I'm trying to protect you. Protect me from what? She shot back, her voice rising in tandem with his. You're the one keeping secrets. If you're in some kind of trouble, don't you think I deserve to know? Taking a deep breath, Daniel's expression softened, though the tension in the room remained palpable. I'm working with the FBI, Emily, he finally admitted, the weight of his words hanging heavily between them. We're investigating a corruption scheme that's tied to my firm. I didn't want to drag you into this. Emily's heart sank, a mixture of shock and confusion flooding her system. The FBI? She echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. You're serious? Yes, he replied, his gaze steady. I'm leading a team that's trying to dismantle a network of corruption, but it's dangerous work, and I didn't want you to worry or get involved. She felt a rush of emotions, relief that he wasn't cheating, anger that he hadn't trusted her, and fear for his safety. You should have told me, she said, her voice wavering. I could have helped you. Daniel shook his head, his frustration evident. I didn't want to put you in danger. This whole thing is risky, and I can't afford to have you caught in the crossfire. Caught in the crossfire? She repeated incredulously. Daniel, I love you. I'm not some fragile flower that needs to be protected. I want to be part of your life, even the messy parts. Daniel's expression softened further as he took a step closer, his voice dropping to a more tender tone. I know you do, and I appreciate that, but this isn't just about us anymore. There are people involved, dangerous people. I don't want to put you at risk. Emily felt a pang of betrayal mixed with admiration. So you thought it would be easier to lie to me instead? She crossed her arms defensively, struggling to keep her composure. It wasn't a lie, he argued, frustration creeping back into his voice. It was a decision made to keep you safe. You wouldn't understand the layers of this investigation. Try me, she challenged, her eyes burning with determination. I'm not going to stand by while you fight this battle alone. If you're in the middle of something so dangerous, then I want to know everything. For a moment, Daniel seemed to reconsider, his gaze searching hers for understanding. I hate that I hurt you by keeping this from you, he said quietly, but I can't promise that you won't be affected. I need to know you're willing to take that risk. Emily met his gaze, her heart pounding. I'm willing, Daniel. I want to be with you, no matter what. But this secret of life, you can't just keep me in the dark. Daniel sighed deeply, the weight of their conversation pressing heavily on him. Okay, he said finally, I'll bring you into the fold, but you have to promise to stay safe, no reckless decisions. Promise, she replied, a sense of resolve filling her. But it's time for the truth, Daniel. No more secrets. As they stood in the fragile silence that followed, Emily realized that their relationship had shifted. They were now bound by a deeper understanding, albeit fraught with newfound complexities. The trust they had built over the years felt tested, but she held on to the hope that together they could navigate the storm ahead. Emily sat at her small desk in the corner of her apartment, surrounded by sketches and design drafts. The late afternoon sun filtered through the window, casting warm golden rays over her workspace. She had been trying to focus on her latest project, but her mind kept drifting back to the shocking revelation she had received from Daniel. The weight of his secret hung heavily in the air, and she felt a mix of pride and dread. As she fiddled with her sketchpad, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. How are you holding up? Let's grab coffee later. Emily stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, to reach out for support, but the fear of revealing too much held her back. Instead, she typed a quick reply. I'm okay, just busy with work. With a sigh, she pushed her phone aside and tried to concentrate on the designs for the FBI operation. She was determined to help Daniel to feel useful in this chaotic whirlwind that had suddenly become their lives. As she sketched out ideas for infographics and presentations, each stroke of her pencil felt like a small act of rebellion against the turmoil inside her. "Hey, Em," Daniel called out as he entered the apartment, his voice echoing with a hint of exhaustion. Emily looked up, her heart racing. She had been waiting for this moment, but now, nerves twisted in her stomach. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Long," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "But I think we made some good progress." He glanced at her sketches, a flicker of pride crossing his face. "What are you working on?" "Oh, just some ideas for the visuals I thought could help with your project," she replied, carefully choosing her words. "I figured some clear graphics could make things easier for the team." Daniel nodded, his expression shifting to one of seriousness. "I appreciate that, really. It means a lot to me that you want to be involved. Just remember to be careful. This isn't just any job." Emily swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his warning. "I know," she said softly, her mind racing back to the troubling discovery she had made about the executive from her agency. "But, listen, I should get back to it," he interrupted, his tone suddenly clipped. "I have a meeting with the team in an hour." "Okay," she said, trying to mask the disappointment in her voice. "Just be careful out there, all right?" "Always," he replied, offering her a quick smile before disappearing into the bedroom. Alone again, Emily sank back into her thoughts. The tension between them was palpable, and she felt the weight of her own secret pressing down on her. How could she share her discovery without betraying Daniel's trust? She needed to think clearly, but the conflict inside her was overwhelming. Later that evening, she decided to take a walk in Central Park. The crisp autumn air filled her lungs, and as she strolled past the trees shedding their leaves, she felt a sense of calm begin to settle. But the tranquility was short-lived. The moment she sat on a bench, her phone buzzed again, this time with a warning from Sarah. "Em, I'm worried about you. Please let me know if you need to talk." Emily hesitated, staring at the message. Should she spill everything to her best friend? But then, what would that mean for Daniel? He had trusted her with his secret. Would sharing it with Sarah make her a traitor? She felt trapped in a web of loyalty and fear. In the silence of the park, she closed her eyes, trying to find clarity. "What should I do?" she whispered to herself, the uncertainty gnawing at her. "I can't keep this from him, but I can't betray him either." As she pondered her dilemma, her mind drifted to the old executive she had once admired. The thought of him being involved in something so corrupt felt like a betrayal to her profession, her values. She could protect her career, but at what cost? With resolve, Emily stood up and headed back home, knowing that she had to confront her fears. She would speak to Daniel. They needed to be a team, facing everything together, no matter how difficult the truth might be. Whatever decision she made, she would have to ensure that their love and trust could withstand the storm ahead. The evening of the gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art arrived, casting a spell of elegance over the city. Emily stood in front of the full-length mirror in her apartment, adjusting the delicate chain around her neck. The soft glow of the lights illuminated her features, highlighting her nervous excitement. She wore a striking navy blue dress that hugged her figure, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions brewing inside her. She took a deep breath, fighting the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Are you ready, Em?" Daniel called from the living room, his voice laced with enthusiasm. "Just about," she replied, forcing a smile as she applied the final touches to her makeup. She could hear Daniel moving around, the sound of his shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. The anticipation of the night ahead was palpable, but so was the weight of the secrets she carried. When she finally stepped into the living room, Daniel turned to face her, his eyes widening in admiration. "Wow, you look incredible," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Thanks, you don't look too bad yourself," she replied, eyeing his tailored suit. "Ready to dazzle them?" he asked, his excitement infectious. "Ready as I'll ever be," Emily responded, though her mind was still clouded with doubt. They left their apartment, the thrill of the night ahead mingling with her unease. As they arrived at the museum, the grandeur of the venue took Emily's breath away. The marble entrance, adorned with golden chandeliers, set the stage for an evening of sophistication. Guests mingled, their laughter and chatter echoing in the high ceilings. Emily clutched Daniel's arm tightly as they entered the gala, the ambiance overwhelming her senses. "Just remember, it's all about the connections we make tonight," Daniel whispered, leaning closer to her. "I know, but..." She hesitated, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. "What if I run into someone I know?" "Then we play it cool. You're with me, right?" "No one can touch us," he reassured her, his confidence radiating. As the night unfolded, Emily tried to enjoy the beautiful art pieces displayed throughout the museum. She smiled and nodded as Daniel introduced her to various colleagues and clients, but her mind wandered. Each time she saw a suited man, she couldn't shake the lingering thought of her ex-colleague, a man who once shared not only office space, but also his shady dealings. Later in the evening, Daniel was pulled away by a group of agents, leaving Emily to navigate the crowd alone. She felt out of place among the high-powered professionals, her heart racing as she spotted a familiar figure across the room. It was Mark, her former colleague. He stood with a group of executives, his demeanor relaxed, but Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "Emily, fancy seeing you here," Mark said, his voice smooth as he approached her. "Hi, Mark," she replied, forcing a smile. "It's quite the event, isn't it?" "Absolutely," he said, leaning closer, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite place. "I've heard some interesting things about your boyfriend. Quite the ambitious one, isn't he?" Emily's heart raced at his words. "Daniel's doing great work," she replied defensively, trying to mask her discomfort. "Work that might lead to some complicated situations," Mark added, a knowing smirk on his lips. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease swelling inside her. "Oh, you know how it goes in this world. Secrets and lies, they can turn friends into enemies very quickly," he said casually, his tone laced with insinuation. Just then, Daniel rejoined her, a look of concern crossing his face as he noticed the tension in the air. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between Emily and Mark. "Just catching up," Emily replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good to see you, Mark," Daniel said, his voice firm. "I hope you're keeping out of trouble." "Always, Daniel," Mark responded, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of the law now, would we?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "Let's enjoy the evening, shall we?" He turned to Emily, taking her hand in his. As they walked away, Emily felt the weight of Mark's gaze on her back, a lingering reminder of the shadows she hoped to escape. She glanced at Daniel, who was oblivious to the underlying tension. The evening was supposed to be a celebration, but doubts gnawed at her insides. She needed to find a way to protect him from the very world he was trying to dismantle. But how could she do that when she felt so trapped between loyalties? The atmosphere inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art was electric, a swirl of elegance and excitement as the gala unfolded under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Emily stood in a corner, her heart racing, the beautiful gown she wore feeling almost constricting as she tried to navigate the chaos swirling around her. She could see Daniel across the room, engaged in conversation with several agents from the FBI, his demeanor confident, yet she felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. As she scanned the room, her gaze fell upon a familiar face. It was Mark, her former colleague from the agency. He moved through the crowd with an air of authority, his sharp suit and piercing gaze making him appear more imposing than she remembered. Their eyes met, and she felt a jolt of recognition, mixed with a wave of dread. Mark had always been ambitious, often crossing ethical lines to get ahead, and now, seeing him here, she couldn't shake the feeling that he might know more than he let on. "Emily, fancy seeing you here," he said, a smirk playing on his lips as he approached her. "You look stunning. How's life treating you?" "Busy," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And you? Still chasing those big corporate clients?" "Always," he chuckled, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. "But I hear you've been involved in something much bigger lately. Rumor has it your boyfriend is knee-deep in a high-profile case. Something about corruption?" Emily's heart raced. Mark's tone was casual, but his words were laced with something sinister. She needed to tread carefully. "It's just work, Mark. You know how it is in this industry." "Work? Or is it something more?" "I can't help but wonder how much you really know," he pressed, his eyes narrowing slightly, searching for a crack in her facade. She forced a smile, trying to maintain her composure. I know enough to keep my distance from shady dealings, unlike some people. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of irritation passing over his face. Careful, Emily. You wouldn't want to get caught in the crossfire of a scandal, especially if you're close to the people involved. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, while internally she screamed at herself for engaging with him. Let's just say, the waters are murkier than they seem. You should be careful who you trust, Mark replied cryptically, stepping back and letting his gaze drift toward Daniel. He's a good-looking guy, but looks can be deceiving. Feeling the tension rise, Emily glanced over at Daniel, who was laughing with his colleagues, seemingly oblivious to the conversation she was having. I trust him, she asserted, her voice stronger now. And I don't appreciate your insinuations. Mark's smile faded, replaced by a cold stare. Just remember, Emily, the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you bury it. With that, he turned and melted back into the crowd, leaving Emily feeling exposed and vulnerable. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Mark's words echoed in her mind, sending her thoughts spiraling. The stakes were higher than she had imagined, and she felt the weight of the secrets she was carrying pressing down on her. As she tried to regain her composure, a sudden idea struck her. She recalled her skills as a designer and how she could use them to help Daniel and the operation without compromising her own integrity. She would create a visual distraction, something that could divert attention from the ongoing investigation and protect Daniel. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she drafted a message to Sarah. I need to use my design skills to help Daniel. Can you meet me? As she hit send, she felt a surge of determination. The moment she had been waiting for had arrived. She wouldn't let fear control her. Emily steeled herself, resolved to take charge of her own narrative, even if it meant walking a fine line between loyalty and self-preservation. With renewed focus, she made her way across the room, her eyes locked on Daniel. She needed to talk to him, to find a way to protect him and the operation. But as she approached, she felt the weight of Mark's warning heavy on her heart. The night was far from over, and the truth about the tangled web of secrets was waiting to be unveiled. As the night of the operation unfolded, an electric energy coursed through the air, each heartbeat echoing the anxious anticipation of what was to come. Emily stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart racing as she watched Daniel lead his team with unwavering determination. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, adorned with exquisite artwork and glimmering chandeliers, felt like a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. She was torn between pride for her partner and the weight of her secret. Look at him, she whispered to herself, her eyes glued to Daniel, who was deep in conversation with two agents. He's incredible. Pride swelled in her chest, but it was quickly dampened by the nagging fear that loomed over her like a shadow. What if the truth came out? What if she failed to protect him? As the evening progressed, she felt a familiar presence beside her, a colleague from the agency who had always prided himself on being the first to know everything. Emily, you look stunning as always, he said, flashing a disarming smile. But it didn't reach his eyes, which gleamed with curiosity. What brings you here? This gala seems a bit out of your usual scene. Oh, just supporting Daniel, she responded, forcing a smile. He's been working hard lately. Right, Daniel? He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. What do you really know about what he's doing? There are whispers, you know, something about corruption in high places. Emily's stomach twisted. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I've heard things, rumors that he might be in over his head. You know how these things go in our industry. People get desperate. He studied her reaction, brows furrowing in concern. Are you sure he's safe? Of course he is, she retorted, her voice sharp. Daniel is. Is what? A hero? Or a pawn in someone else's game? He interrupted her, a hint of smugness in his tone. You should be careful, Emily. Secrets have a way of catching up to people. Before she could respond, Emily felt the tension in the air shift. Daniel was making his way toward her, his expression confident, but his eyes betraying a flicker of stress. Hey there. You look beautiful, he said, wrapping an arm around her waist. The warmth of his touch sent a wave of comfort through her, but it was short-lived. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Later, I promise. Right now, I need to focus." He glanced over his shoulder, spotting a few agents who were signaling to him. "Just keep an eye on things, all right? I'll be right back." As he disappeared into the crowd, Emily's heart sank. She could feel the weight of her secret pressing down harder, a constant reminder of the dual life she was living. The atmosphere was charged. She could see agents moving purposefully, heads bowed together in serious discussion. "Everything all right?" Sarah's voice broke through her thoughts as her best friend approached, concern etched on her face. "Not really," Emily admitted, glancing around nervously. "I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. I overheard some unsettling things tonight." "Like what?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowing. "Just things about Daniel's case, people questioning his safety. It's all so complicated." Emily sighed, running her fingers through her hair in frustration. "Emily, you know he's good at what he does. He has a team backing him. Just trust him," Sarah encouraged, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You two will get through this together." As the evening wore on, Emily felt a surge of hope as she watched Daniel interact with his colleagues. He was in his element, commanding respect and admiration. But that hope was quickly overshadowed by the realization of her own role in this web of secrecy. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something monumental, her heart caught between love and fear. As the clock ticked down to the operation's launch, Emily's resolve hardened. She would do whatever it took to protect Daniel and the integrity of their relationship. The stakes were higher than she had ever anticipated, and she knew that her next move would define not only their future, but also their love. The night was far from over, and she was determined to face whatever came next, together. The atmosphere in the small cafe near their apartment was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling within Emily as she sat across from Daniel. The soft clinking of cups and the murmur of voices in the background faded into a blur as the weight of their unspoken words hung heavily in the air. Daniel stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, his brow furrowed, a clear sign that he was lost in thought. "Emily," he began, his voice barely breaking the silence. He looked up, his blue eyes searching hers for understanding. "We need to talk about what happened at the gala." Emily felt her heart race at the mention of the event, the tension still fresh in her mind. "I know, Daniel. I've been thinking about it too," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. "I didn't want to keep secrets from you. I didn't know how to tell you what I found out." Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "You were right to be concerned. I was involved in something dangerous, and I get that you were looking out for me. But the way you handled it felt like a betrayal." Emily's stomach twisted at his words, each syllable piercing her heart. "I never meant to betray you. I was scared, Daniel. I saw someone I knew, someone I didn't want to be involved with, and it terrified me. I thought I was protecting you by staying quiet." "By staying quiet?" Daniel's voice rose slightly, frustration evident. "You put yourself in danger. You put everything we've built at risk. I needed you to trust me, to believe in what I was doing, even if it seemed shady." "I thought you were hiding something from me," Emily protested, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I thought you were part of the corruption, that you were in over your head. I just wanted to know the truth." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair, clearly torn between anger and understanding. "And I wanted to protect you from that truth. I didn't want you to be involved in this world. It's messy, Emily. It's dangerous. I know that now," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I also felt like I was losing you. I didn't know how to reach out when everything felt so uncertain." He looked at her, the frustration in his eyes giving way to a softer expression. "I wish you had come to me instead of trying to figure it out on your own. We could have faced it together." "I know," Emily admitted, her heart aching as she took his hand across the table, their fingers intertwining. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I should have trusted you. I should have believed in us." The tension began to ebb between them, replaced by a shared understanding. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his voice more measured now. "We've always been a team. I don't want to go through this without you. We have to communicate better, especially when it comes to things that can affect us both." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and hope. "You're right. I'll do better. I promise. I want us to be stronger than this." He took a deep breath, looking intently into her eyes. "I need you to understand that I'm part of something bigger now. It's not just about us anymore. It's about doing what's right for others too. I can't do it alone, and I don't want to hide anything from you again." "I want to be there for you," she replied earnestly. "I want to help however I can, even if it means facing my fears. You've shown me how important it is to stand up against corruption." Daniel smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting in a way that made Emily's heart flutter. "Together we can make a difference, but we have to promise each other that we'll always communicate. No more secrets." "Agreed," Emily said, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "From now on, we face everything together." "I love you, Daniel." "I love you too, Emily," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "And I believe in us." In that moment, as they sat together in the cafe, the weight of their earlier arguments began to lift, replaced by a shared commitment to transparency and trust. They were no longer just two individuals navigating a complicated world. They were partners, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with open hearts and minds. As the city celebrated the successful operation, vibrant lights painted the skyline of Manhattan, and the air buzzed with excitement. Emily stood beside Daniel on the balcony of their apartment, her heart racing. The earlier tension between them had begun to fade, but the weight of her secret still loomed heavily in her mind. She felt the warmth of Daniel's hand in hers, a reassuring presence amid the chaos of their recent struggles. "Can you believe it?" Daniel said, a broad smile on his face as he gazed out at the twinkling lights below. "We actually did it. We brought those guys down." Emily nodded, her thoughts racing. She wanted to share her discovery about her former colleague, the one who had hinted at something bigger, but the words felt stuck in her throat. Instead, she turned to Daniel, her eyes searching his face for any hint of the vulnerability she had witnessed during their confrontation. "Yeah, it's incredible. But I have something I need to tell you." Daniel's expression shifted slightly, curiosity replacing the joy in his eyes. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, Emily felt the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. "It's about my old colleague, Greg. The one that I ran into at the gala." She paused, the gravity of her next words weighing heavily on her. "He was involved in something much larger than just what we saw tonight." Daniel furrowed his brow, concern etched on his features. "What do you mean? How do you know?" "I overheard him talking to someone else after you went to speak with the other agents. He mentioned a name that I recognized. Someone connected to the executives we targeted. It sounded like there's a whole web of corruption that extends beyond what we just dealt with." Emily's voice trembled slightly, the fear of revealing the truth battling with the urgency to act. Daniel's grip on her hand tightened. "Emily, are you sure? This could change everything. If what you're saying is true, we need to act fast." "I know," she replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "I didn't want to believe it at first, but I can't ignore what I heard. I think we should report this to the FBI. They need to know." He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing as he processed the information. "But what if Greg is tipped off? If he knows we're onto him, he could disappear, or worse, he could retaliate against you." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," Emily stated firmly, her determination growing. "We can't let them keep getting away with this, not if it means endangering people's lives." Daniel looked into her eyes, seeing the resolve that had emerged from their trials. "You're right. We have to expose this, not just for us, but for everyone affected by their greed and corruption." He paused, a flicker of admiration crossing his face. "You're brave, you know that?" She smiled softly, feeling a sense of camaraderie that had been rekindled between them. "We're in this together, right? I couldn't have come this far without you." "Together," he echoed, leaning in to kiss her gently. "Let's do this. We'll go to the office first thing in the morning and tell them everything." As they stood on the balcony, the city lights twinkling like stars around them, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would face this challenge as a team, armed with their love and determination. The following day, they arrived at the FBI office, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Daniel led Emily through the bustling corridors, their hands intertwined. He exchanged nods and greetings with colleagues, his confidence evident. Finally, they entered a conference room where several agents were already gathered. "Everyone, thank you for coming on such short notice," Daniel began, his tone serious. "Emily and I have important information regarding the operation we just concluded. It seems we've only scratched the surface of a much larger scheme." Emily felt the weight of the room's attention on her as she stepped forward. "I encountered one of the individuals involved at the gala, and I believe he's linked to a network of corruption that could extend beyond what we've just dismantled. We need to investigate further." The agents exchanged glances, surprise and intrigue washing over their faces. "Do you have any evidence?" one of the agents asked, leaning in. "I can provide the details of the conversation I overheard," Emily replied, her voice steady. "I believe it could lead us to uncovering the full extent of the operation." As she shared her insights, Daniel's pride was palpable. Emily's courage and clarity shone through, and he knew they had made the right choice. As the discussions unfolded and plans were laid out, Emily felt a sense of liberation. The secrets that had once threatened to tear them apart now became the foundation of their shared mission. Together, they stood strong against the darkness, ready to expose the truth and protect their city. In that moment, amidst the whirlwind of determination and teamwork, Emily realized that they had not only discovered a deeper bond, but had also ignited a shared purpose that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they were unstoppable. Hold up. Ever wonder how a simple gesture can change lives? In the last video, you saw how giving a new pair of shoes to a man on the streets of New York made a huge impact, but that's just the beginning. Who is he, and why did that moment change everything? Find out now. Click the video on your screen and dive into this unexpected story.